The following is a presentation of the Mat Talk Podcast Network.
These guys aren't playing around. It's time to put the books away and get in the room. It's time for Wrestling Recess. Now your hosts, Dyson Gould and Dom Deputy. PA Power Wrestling. Pennsylvania is wrestling.
What's up, guys? This is Dominic Deputy back here for another episode of the PA Power Wrestling Recess podcast. Today I'm going to be interviewing NFL long snapper and former Pennsylvania wrestler who was a state champ for Philipsburg-Osceola, Jon Condo. Okay, John, what's up?
Hey, what's up, Dominic? How you guys doing?
Good, pretty good. How are you?
Doing well, man. Just living life out here in California, taking one day at a time and doing what each day brings me.
So I have some questions prepared for you. Would you mind if I asked you a couple?
Perfect.
How did wrestling help you prepare for football both mentally and physically?
I think the mental aspect of it, I learned right away when I began wrestling, when I started to get more competitive, is that, you know, in order to be good, you have to put in the work. And it's just not work, you know, just by showing up, you know, that's not usually not good enough. It's, you know, you have to work hard. You have to, you know, do the extra things to work on your technique, your conditioning, and all that stuff. And what the hard work developed in me was a strong mind. And I think that strong mind easily carried over into my college football career and into the NFL career that I had. It made it a lot harder for me mentally to give up. You know, whenever I'm, you know, training in the off season and in the weight room or doing conditioning, or even in fourth quarter of games, you know, when it got tough, you know, I was very less likely, you know, I never gave in. So I think wrestling, you know, I developed a mentally tough personality and attitude, and it made everything kind of easy, because I never once thought about giving in, throwing in the towel, and quitting. Physically, you know, wrestling, you know, I thrived on, you know, being in great shape, preparing myself as best as I can to go out there and compete. And I think just that right there got me used to, you know, being at the, you know, the best shape that I could be in. And whenever I would work out in the off season and performing during the season, you know, I would always do whatever was required and more, just so I knew that I was prepared. And that right there gave me the confidence, because I like to go into each, you know, game and when I wrestled each match, you know, knowing that I outworked my opponent. And just by me being able to tell myself that, like, gave me, I think, an edge, just because it gave me the confidence to compete.
How did wrestling teach you to be a better football player, as in, like, getting leverage, footwork, etc.?
Yeah, so wrestling was huge. When it comes to the position I played, you know, I was in high school and into college, I was a linebacker as well as a fullback. But for me, being a linebacker, I pass rushed a lot. And I think just that close contact that you have in wrestling, the hand fighting, the body positioning, the balance that you get from being out on the mat, transferred over on the football field for me, and it worked awesome. Even whenever I was long snapping, I'd have to snap the ball and protect, and guys would try to, you know, on the punt return team would try to hold me up. They would try to block me, and that right there, they're trying to get their hands, you know, on the inside of my breastplate of my shoulder pads, and I wouldn't want them to get there. So wrestling, the hand fighting that you do in wrestling, you know, was definitely transferred over to that aspect of the football, play of being a long snapper. And I would fight for inside hand position to get his hands off of me, and get an angle to start running down the field.
Would you recommend all football players to wrestle?
Oh, without a doubt. I've been asked that question, by coaches and parents. I think wrestling is the best sport, and I'm probably biased with that when it comes to developing a young person, not only on the athletic side but also outside of athletics. I think it just does something to an individual where you are required, a certain commitment to being a wrestler, and you have to dedicate yourself to your body and your team and your coaching staff, and I think that easily, whether you have a life after high school in athletics, or if you go into college and go into the workforce, I think once you've wrestled, it will prepare you a lot easier for what life has to offer you.
Some football players don't have the best view of the sport of wrestling. How would you get them kind of into the sport?
Well, show them some matches, especially at the college level. You see some matches if you're watching like the Nationals or any dual meets that you find on the TV. If they see two guys out there battling for 6-7 minutes, it's hard to deny the endurance that you need to be a wrestler. And if they still don't believe it after watching a battle of some top tier wrestlers, say, hey, let's spar a little bit, let's do a little bit of drill work, and they'll know right away. Like, it is definitely a lot harder than what it looks. But you can also show them, with the new sport, or with mixed martial arts, with the UFC and all that kind of stuff. You see a lot of former wrestlers transferring over into that arena, and they're having tremendous success. And I think football players in general respect UFC fighters, because it's that's being a gladiator right there. But they might not know that a lot of UFC fighters are former wrestlers.
Okay, now on to some questions about your career as a wrestler. How and when were you introduced to the sport of wrestling and football?
My dad was a wrestling coach prior to when I was born, and when I was born, he always had his hand into youth wrestling. In the Junior Olympics, that is, in Pennsylvania. And I was fortunate enough to have dual older brothers that wrestled, and I was always at the dual meets and stuff as a kid, so I was always on the mat. And I just remember my first time competing, I just went to a wrestling tournament with my brothers, and they weighed in, and I think my dad just said, hey, do you want to wrestle today? And I didn't have a singlet, I didn't have a headgear, I didn't even have wrestling shoes, I said, definitely. So I just remember wrestling without, I think I went in my socks, really, and my shorts and shirts that I had on, and I wrestled and I competed, and I loved it. And it's still, I always told people, because I wrestled and I played football and I played baseball, and people would ask what was my favorite sport, and I just always said whatever was the season, because I truly loved competing, and each sport allowed me to compete. And but wrestling, it's something special about wrestling. I had success in wrestling as in high school and whatnot, but it's just something about being out on the mat, being in a dual meet versus one other person, and you're alone out there by yourself, and the best man wins. And so to get back to the question, my first year football was in 8th grade, I believe. That was the first year they had organized football at my school. There's really no Pee Wee programs at my school. There was some in the area, but I just never really got involved. But I did have, like I said, two older brothers that played, and I would always go to the games on Friday night, and I would be with my elementary friends, basically not even watching the games, but on the practice field, playing, backyard football. So that was kind of my introduction to football then.
You said you had success in high school, but did you have success at before high school in both wrestling and football?
Yeah. So before high school, I think when I wrestled, I was always pretty good for the most part. In JOs, I think I made it to the state tournament once. Junior high, I was kind of mediocre in 7th grade and had a better year my 8th grade, and then 19th grade I stayed at the junior high level, and I went undefeated. And I remember my sophomore year in high school, I started on varsity, and my record was, I believe, 20-13, and I wrestled 171 and 189 at the time, and being a heavier weight, I was wrestling a lot of upperclassmen, and I believe I got pinned 10 times my sophomore year. And then my junior year, I wrestled 189, and I made it to the state tournament and placed 5th. And then my senior year, I went 36-1 entering to the state tournament, and I ended up being a state champ. So if, I never got discouraged, after my sophomore year, especially after getting pinned. I believe I might have to go back and check, but I want to say it was at least 10 times that I got pinned. But, I just kept on working hard, and I used that as motivation that, it's kind of, I was always embarrassed whenever I got pinned, but, you can't hold that against yourself. You got to work and use that as motivation to get better. But yeah, and as well as football, I've had success. I think with football is, I played, I had success, but my teammates allowed me, put me in good positions to have success, as a running back and a linebacker. And if I didn't have an offensive line in front of me, then I wouldn't have any yards and whatnot. So I appreciate, all of my former teammates in football that, allowed me, put me in a great position to have success. And if you ever get the opportunity, you just got to be able to take advantage of it.
Who was your biggest influence as a young wrestler?
As a young wrestler, I always looked up to, when I was in elementary, I always looked up to the varsity guys. Specifically my brother. I'd always, at the time he was on varsity and I was in elementary, and I looked up to him, but there was always some good wrestlers that, that were pretty good, and I always looked up to them. I always, tried to emulate them, try to do things they did. And then, and also my father, who had success, as in high school, and he taught me some valuable life lessons, and taught me about hard work and commitment, and I never wanted to disappoint him, and I always did the best that I could.
Did your parents play a big part in your career in both wrestling and football?
Of course, they put me in a great position to compete in sports, and they never pushed it on me, but they always supported my decisions and what I wanted to do. My mom was my biggest cheerleader for every sport that I did. She was, in high school she was at the majority, if not all of my varsity matches. I knew she was my biggest cheerleader. And my dad, he was my coach at the time, and I knew, I could count on him to always have my back. And whenever if I had issues or problems or, just any other difficulties, I knew I could go to him, and he'd always, be able to, bring me back down to earth and, make me feel comfortable with where I'm at.
Describe to me your mindset going into your state tournament when you took 5th.
Yeah, so I was a junior. I placed 2nd that year at the Northwest Regional tournament, and going in, I I not sure if I really. I mean, I set a goal that I wanted to place, and so I wanted to win a couple matches. I wasn't going in there wanting to be a state champ. I didn't have that as a goal. I thought like a more realistic goal would be, to work hard to win a couple matches and try to get on the podium, at the end of the tournament. And I went into the tournament. I won my first match, lost my second, then won I think the next three, and ended up getting a fifth place finich.
How about when you took first?
When I took first, I ended up, is a crazy, not a crazy year. I went 36-1 prior to the tournament, but my only loss happened in the semifinals of the Northwest Regional Tournament. And so I had to battle back and take third place in that tournament just to qualify. And then when I qualified, I saw the draw that we had, and I was going to face, my first opponent was a kid from Northampton, and he was he placed first in his region. I knew it was going to be a tough match. And then I knew if I were to beat him, and if I were to win the quarterfinal match, I would have gotten a rematch of the kid who beat me in the Northwest Regional semifinal. And I knew it was going to be a tough tournament, and fortunately, I made it to the finals and won the state finals. And something that it's funny. I look at the kid who I beat in the first round. He ended up taking third. The kid who I beat in the quarterfinals ended up taking seventh place. The kid I beat in the semifinals ended up taking fifth. So every kid that I beat, placed and won their consolation final match.
Yeah, that's cool. Who was your high school wrestling rival?
Individually or team?
Individually.
Individually is a guy named Tim Taylor. So it was our senior year. I remember I was heavyweight. Now at that time they didn't have the 215-pound weight class, so I only weighed about 210 to 215 pounds, I would say. And I wasn't ranked, at all at the start of the season, and then I might have been like 6th or 7th if they even do that high of rankings anymore. But then I wrestled Tim in the dual meet. We were probably a town probably 20 minutes away from each other, and I ended up wrestling him, and he was ranked first at the time, and I ended up beating him 7-6, 7-5, and it was a packed house, basically standing room only, if there was standing room only. Just because our towns were so close, and it was a pretty big hyped match. And I ended up beating him, and then after that match, they ranked me as number 1, and I think he was like number 2 or 3 or whatever. And he was the same kid that beat me in the Northwest Regionals in the semifinal match. So that state semifinal match was basically the rubber match. He was definitely a great competitor, and he went on to, I believe, wrestle, I want to say, in the military. So, but yeah, it was some great matches we had, and when you look at it, since I won the last match, I guess I got the best end of it.
Did your wrestling success help you get football scholarships for college?
Yes, it did. One of those matches that I had against my rival, a college football recruit came from Maryland and was at that dual meet. And I remember he was standing behind the bench, and after I wrestled, he came over and jumped on me. And I think that right there probably sealed the deal that they knew they got the right guy. Because I think I committed just prior to the wrestling season, but he knew that I was a wrestler, and the coach at the time at Maryland, the head coach at the time, he really enjoyed recruiting wrestlers just because he knew what he was going to get from a wrestler. He knew he was going to get a committed individual that worked hard, that was blue-collared, that he could count on, a guy that he could rely on. And that's what, that's what the coach at the time wanted. And I still believe that there's coaches out there that's what they want. They know if they get a wrestler, they could count they could count on that individual to do what's best for the team.
What stood out to you about Maryland, whether it was the community, the coaching staff?
I think for me, I grew up in a small town, and I think Maryland offered me to get out of that town, just to see basically the country. And but it was only a 3.5 hour drive, so I could still get home if I wanted to get home on a weekend. But I also like the coaching staff. The coaching staff, they're a good group of guys, I believe, and I felt a sense of comfort with them, and I had belief in them, and I had a good relationship with them. You know, they made me feel like I belonged, and I like that. I like that.
Did any schools recruit you for wrestling?
Yeah, I had coaches calling me, especially a little bit, after my junior year, but especially after I won the states. Some coaches, not knowing that I committed to football, were trying to persuade me to wrestle, but I already committed, and once I, committed my word, I didn't want to go back on it. I think what made me choose football over wrestling and baseball was I asked myself this question. I go, listen, when I'm 30 years old, would I be able to get on a wrestling mat and still wrestle? And the answer was yes. I could be a wrestling coach and I could still wrestle. When I'm 30 years old, would I be able to still play baseball? And I think the answer is yes. There's county leagues and leagues, summer leagues where older men can still play baseball. But when I came to the football aspect of it, when I'm 30 years old, can I still put on a football helmet and still play football? I mean, the chances of doing that are really, really slim, just because there's not that many like semi-pro leagues out there, especially like in Pennsylvania. I mean, there might be some in Philly or Pittsburgh, but where I was from, I just didn't see that opportunity. So I that's the reason why I decided to play football. The biggest reason I decided to play football in college.
Did wrestling skills still help you going up through college?
Oh, yeah. I mean, without a doubt. I mean, to get back on earlier in our conversations, the skills that I learned in wrestling, not necessarily the physical skills, but just the value that it taught me in committing myself and dedicating, to my team and to my coaching staff and to myself, that, I wanted to be the best that I could be. And in order to do that, you have to be able to commit and do what's best, to get the best results. And it definitely, you can easily see it transfer over into college life. It prepared me to, and how I prepared for classes and how I prepared for exams and papers. It just made me work harder in the classroom.
Did you still stay connected with the sport of wrestling through college?
Yeah, definitely. Even whenever I was in college at the time when I went to Maryland, I was friends with some of the wrestlers, and they didn't really have a heavyweight. I mean, they were filling the heavyweight. Class, or the heavyweight position, but they didn't have like a true heavyweight. And they're like, Condo, you should come try out. You could probably, start for us, because they had at the time, I think, a 97 pounder bumping up to wrestle. And at that time I was probably 230-ish. And I thought about it. I even asked my football coach if I could do it. And I laid out, all the positives. I'm like, listen, I won't be in better shape if I started to wrestle. So the conditioning program that we're doing now in the off season, I wouldn't be missing that because I'll be wrestling and I'll be getting in better shape. But I think he feared that I would hurt myself. And he saw my value in the team as a long snapper, and he didn't really want to take that risk. He kind of gave me the option that he left it on me that I could do it, but I was still obligated to do all the football requirements, all the weight training and all the conditioning training. as well as, attending classes and study hall and then, doing my obligation as a wrestler. I just thought that would be way too much for me if I still had to be committed to the football aspect of training.
Was it your goal to go to the NFL, and was it something you thought was possible in college?
As a kid, it was a dream. And then when I got to college, I think I learned pretty quickly, that dream, is probably not going to happen based on my ability. I started the long snap, not thinking that I could have a future in it. It was basically a fluke situation. I never did it in my life. But the coach asked me, the starting long snapper fell out of school, and they asked, anyone who can do it. And I said, here, I'll try it. And I think I was the only guy that can actually get the ball back there for 15 yards. And they're like, okay, it's your job. So, and it probably wasn't until the end of my junior year where I saw that there could be a life outside of college or after college, with this in the NFL. And then definitely going into my senior year, meeting, or seeing, the college scouts coming in or pro scouts coming into our college practices and watching me snap, like it definitely made it more of a reality that it could happen.
Did you still stay connected with wrestling throughout your NFL career?
I'm sorry, did I still stay connected with wrestling? Yeah, I still love to watch it. Anytime I get a chance, and I think now, like ESPN and some of the major sports broadcasting channels, with Big Ten Network, that's really any, because I'm a Maryland guy in the Big Ten now, but that's really any conference network that I watch. But now, I'm able to get out here on the West Coast and watch it, more freely, than whenever I was growing up as a kid. I think growing up as a kid, they really only showed the finals, I want to say, if they showed it at all on TV. But now they're showing basically all the rounds, and it's fun to watch. And I definitely, anticipate that time of year to be able to record it and watch it and root on, whoever I root for.
Did wrestling skills still help you then?
Oh yeah, without a doubt. I mean, I don't see there ever be a time in my life where the skills that I learned from wrestling will dissipate and not be there. I think they're ingrained in my personality and in my mind. I'll always carry it with me.
How would you get your kids into wrestling?
I don't like parents, and I'm sure it happens when they force their kids into wrestling or into any other sport. I wouldn't force it upon my kids to do something they wouldn't want to do. What I would do is just introduce it to them by, watching on TV, maybe taking them to a dual meet, at the local high school or anything like that. Just seeing if they're excited about it, and take them to a dual meet. And if they ask to see it again, then they might be a little interested. Take them, see them again, and look into the youth program. Most schools have a youth program, and maybe, hey, you want to sign up for wrestling, and take them to a couple practices. Let them decide if they want to do it or not. Don't just kind of force it upon them, I would say. I think that happens a lot and whatnot.
What did wrestling do for you the most in life?
I think the biggest thing that I've taken away from wrestling was working hard. Wrestling, forced me to work hard, to achieve my goals. And it doesn't matter what I do, whether it's with football related or anything else, doing, yard work, I've always, I've always found myself just to be a hard worker and not really stopping until I get the job done, really.
Well, thank you, Jon. That's all I got for you today. Maybe I can have you on some other time.
Yeah, that'd be great, man. Had a good time.
I did too. Thanks a lot for coming on.
No problem. Have a good day.
You too.